Aloha in our third section on Akua Mana. Just look at some examples so we can think about so-called sites, sites of worship that you might see or have experienced or know of. And the first here, which is probably one of the more common kinds of worshiping sites you might find around the islands, and generally you'd find them around ocean, seashore areas, places that have a long history of perhaps fishing or gathering of food from the ocean, and that's the ku'ula. Yeah, the word ku, the god ku, yeah, stand upright, and ula, which means red ku. And so ku'ula are specific, especially those. Sometimes there are actually stones that actually look like a fish. Sometimes I've seen even so-called wood or sticks that are being carved or naturally shaped and look like fish. Yeah. But these places, especially for fishing, and if you look here, you can see there's various uprights. Yeah, very phallic symbol, cool. And if you look good, you might see some coral heads or coral that's usually placed around it. And what it's supposed to represent as a koa is the word koa means coral, is that's the same word you find for what you would think of as being fishing grounds. Yeah, so when you would take your canoe out traditional times, feed the fish, cast your net, those particular areas that were taken care of by families. So, if, for example, in places like Miloli'i or Mala and Maui and Lahaina, these families would basically feed the fish in these areas. They would actually feed the fish for particular months, and then when the fish fatten up, and then they would come with the nets after training the fish to accumulate in a particular area. And so the koa in the ocean is represented by these koa on land, and one particular god of these koa was ku'ula. So generally, as you feed the essence, yeah, in the spiritual, as you feed, you make offerings to the ku'ula. You're really making offerings, of course, to the koa in the ocean, as if you're feeding the fish in a spiritual way. And so, you can think about places, you can find these ku'ula and koa still around many places around the islands, especially, of course, if they haven't been touched by overdevelopment and promontory sites. Sometimes some are very large, 20 by 20. Sometimes they're very, very small, 2 feet by 2 feet. And so, they come in different shapes and sizes, but generally there'll be some kind of upright and coral. Now, Luakini, remember, these are the high ranking temples. Generally, these are the temples that only the highest ranking ali'i would use in the highest kahuna. And sometimes there would be places of residents of the high ranking ali'i in kahuna. They're usually found in very prominent places. As you can see, this is in Pokukalo, just on the Waihe'e side of Iao Stream or Wailuku River. And you can see there are actually two heiau there, but this is an example of one of the Luakini. Sometimes they might have flat areas, sometimes they might have containment walls, sometimes it's platforms. But you can see the size and scope of these Luakini, where you would have the highest level of worshiping would occur. In fact, this is why even to this day, a Luakini sometimes refers to a modern European American, a Christian church. Pu'uhonua. Remember, these are the places of refuge. And this is one that we find on Maui. And sorry, I gotta remember the name. Anyway, this is right above, kind of near the actually right below. If you know what a Waihe'e Trail on the West Maui side, past Waihe'e on the way to Kahakuloa, there's the Waihe'e Ridge Trail, and right below the trail, if you look down, you're gonna see a little pool, a little hill, and this is in fact where you had one of the puhonua that situates there. Again, very beautiful site, prominent site, overlooking this area. And these are one, and you'd find puhonua throughout the islands. Yeah, so these were places of sanctuary that you would find. Here's a modern, sorry, I should say a modern, traditional, natural, the word I was looking for, a natural element that you find that is considered a site of worship. And this is, for example, the pohaku o hauola, or the hauola stone. And if you're familiar with Lahaina, this used to be the stone just past outside of the harbor, right outside of the old um, library. Yeah, right on Front Street, right outside there, near where all the ships are moored, and there's a large rock there called Pohakuhauola that was said to be in different function as a healing stone, where people, if they were sick or dealing with illness, may go there and would sit and pray upon the stone, make offerings. Some said that they would bathe in the waters on the stone. It was also used for women who maybe had a hard time conceiving, or as sometimes called, like a stone that would help them to heal themselves so they could have children. Yeah, so that's the Pohako. And the word Ola, as you can see in Hawaiian, the word Ola, which means life and health, is part of the stone. But this is an example of a natural feature. Yeah, so if you did not know the story, if you did not know the background, and you just looked at this, you would just appear to be just a large stone. You would not see any human artifacts upon the stone. Yeah, so again, this is an example of how even natural features are very, very important. Kapela Kapu'o Kakai. Yeah, this is in Iao at the very back of what today is the Iao State Park. And, you can see uh, the pu'u there, yeah, Kakai. Or uh, Kakai was a famous ali'i of Hawaii, but the Kapela Kapu refers to the sacred restricted place where the bones of the iwi, yeah, the iwi kupuna, of the most highest ranking ali'i from all the islands, not just Maui, would be taken and secreted and hidden. This is our version of the Valley of the so-called Kings. From the time of Maveke, and some of the earliest ali'i that had come to, that were said to have been born in fact, in Hawaii. So the royal birthing stones in Kukaniloko was a common site of birthing. And then the ali'i, when they passed on from all the islands, many times would be brought and hidden into this cave area, or series of caves, as I understand, in Iao. So that's why Iao is considered, I'm going to say, not the most sacred. It's definitely one of the most important so-called sacred restricted areas you find in Hawaii. And that's because the highest ranking ali'i had their burial. Iwi, the bones of the Iwi were hidden there. Of course, even places like Halekala, yeah, House of the Sun, the very top of the mountain itself, upon the highest part of the mountain. Yeah, there are no artifacts, there are no so-called religious structures that were created. That the top of the mountain itself was seen as being sacred, yeah, and would be approached, and particular protocols. And I mean, it is very, very spectacular as a view and as a place to experience in of itself. So I mean, it already just by experiencing the place, you can see how so-called holy this place is. It's as close to the so-called gods as you can find. Yeah. And so again, the point being is that, you know, when you think of the word worship, you got to remember that worship doesn't necessarily mean in a kind of like, in a Christian sense of how the worship can be a simple prayer, a simple acknowledgement, a simple kind of way of just experiencing that place of reverence. And that's probably a better word to use, yeah, which is halakala. Now, the largest heiau in all of Hawaii, in fact, all of Polynesia, and in fact, the second largest of all of the Pacific, is found on Maui on the east end, Honolulu area, just before you hit Hana Town, Bahana Airport, down at the ocean side, as you can see. And you can take a look at how large and massive these are all the coconut trees, as you can see, down in that area. And it actually extends up into this middle area back here. And there's been a long-term restoration effort. Now, there's an interesting history about this hail. We see it recorded in stories, only a couple of places, but it doesn't really mention that it was huge. It had kind of a momentous use. And it had been, this is very interesting, the enigma, it had basically been hidden all the way to the, if I remember right, the late 1950s or early 1960s, where some people came upon it. Now, when you talk to a lot of the native informants or people from the land or families, people born and raised there, and they would talk about how there's a little house in this area down to the right here. And so the families, when they would come and stay in the area, would stay in this area where you find burials and a cemetery and the family plots. And they would fish the coastline. And the kids were always told to just stay in this area, stay within the walls, and especially not to go up into this area. So it's almost like this self-banning of themselves. Again, kapu, right? Restricting themselves and saying not to go up there, to leave that place alone. And so when it comes to even the earliest so-called archaeologists that came around in the early 1900s, for example, Guy Walker, who went around and basically tried to document all the sacred religious sites, it's not, again, the largest hill in Hawaii was not even on the records until more recently in regards to a site location. Yeah. Sometimes referred to Haleo Pi'ilani, the house of Pi'ilani or Pi'ilani Hale, and these are related to the Pi'ilani line that comes out of Maui, sort of royal families of Pi'ilani. And I would say, if you follow things like, if you've seen HBO and you watch, Game of Thrones and they get House Lannister or something, that's what the Pi'ilani say, this house of rule, that is this dynasty, and that's the Pi'ilani. And it was said to be started by his son Lono Pi'ilani, and then finished by his younger brother, Kiha Pi'ilani. But you can go and visit that to this day. There's a wonderful arboretum area where it had, for example, various collections of plants, and in fact, it has the largest, as I understand, the largest collection of breadfruit in the world. And so it's a national arboretum, yeah, that you can go and visit. This is at East End of Maui also, Ka'ivi Pele, and there's a couple of, just we call it the word Wahi Pana. Yeah, Wahi, Wahi, Pana, Pana. And it's a storied place. That doesn't have to be sacred, but it's a place, landmarks that have a particular story. And so I don't have a good image here, but on the left, this area is called Ka'ivi Pele. It's a hill right at the beach area. If you know Hana, right outside of the small island of Alau, you have Koki Beach near us. You have Lehu'ula, which is right behind us here, and a lot of stories associated. But Kaivio Pele virtually means the bones of Pele. And as the story goes, this is where Pele's physical body dies. And it's her Kino Wairu, her spirit form, that travels off to Muku'aweoweo on Hawaii Island to reside on Mauna Loa. But, other stories associated, Lehu'ula, which is this area right here, is said to be the very first fish pond. Yeah, aquaculture, first fish pond in the world was constructed there. Yeah, and so, of course, we should understand that Hawaiians, in fact, led the world in this idea of aquaculture at this time. And leho ula, which means the red leho, cowrie shell, was the name of that this so-called fish pond. And that red shell was what attracted all the fish into the pond. And in the story of leho ula, there's said to be this giant eel who came from Molokai, Keko'ona, a prince of Molokai who would sneak his way, and he was a kupua. It means he could change. He was a shapeshifter. He could change into a giant eel, and he would come and feast off of the fish that he found built by Ai and Hina Puku'i'a. And there's the father, which is Ku'ulakai, or Ku'ulakai, and the son being Ai. And in the struggle with this eel, eventually what happens, the eel is caught, is pulled up, and if you look way in the distance here, you see a little large hole there, and that's supposed to represent the jawbone of the eel. And you can't really see here, but there's a long row of rocks that looks like a long spine, like iwi kumo'o, that's supposed to represent the bones of the eel that you can find here. Again, using that as a story for these so-called legends. Pihana Kalani Haliki, again, I talked about this earlier, it's just a different angle. So this is right above Pakukalo. Hawaiian homes would be on the left, and second save would be on the right. And this is that area. As you can see, very large, flat area. You can see to the right here, these large stone terrace walls. But you have two, in fact, hail, Pihana Kalani and Haliki. In fact, the word Haliki means the house of images. Would be here. But if you look from that prominent area, you can go and look up to the top of the valleys. You can see down the coastline towards Waihe and Kakuloa, and you can see all the way down the northern part of the coastline towards probably towards Nahiku and Keanai and so forth. Yeah. This is Pu'ukeka on Maui. This is Ka'anapali. This is in fact the Sheraton Maui, if you went to the beach there. And Pu'ukeka is this hill area right to the left here. And it was said that, even with the coming of the first foreigners when they came to Hawaii, would describe this area covered in bones that covered this whole area. So it was a huge area of bones that would be popping out of the sand and so forth. And so it's kind of seen as like a spooky, ghostly area. But this is in fact in our stories where it is said that we call a Leina. Yeah, Leina, Leina. So I think it's in your readings also, Leina, which is a jumping off area. These are areas where when you pass on, it said that at sunset, as the sun sets, you can see that, the glitter, the shimmer on the ocean. That's the trail leading to take the so-called spirits who have passed on, so they can follow and return to Po. And for Maui, this is a very important spot that Lane had said that, if you would jump in the water from this spot, it's like you jumping into the afterlife and so forth. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, of course, you have a large hail that was built right into that area. You have condos and all kind of sorts of hotel rooms that are built right on Pu'ukeka. But still, in regards to a very special place, yeah, this is where the spirits of those who have passed on, this is where they depart this realm to return to Po. So again, Leina, Leina. This is Honokahua, just example of a modern burial area. Well, modern today. It was a traditional area of burials where thousands of kupuna had been buried. And in the late 1980s, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel under the Maui Land and Pine, who were looking to develop these lands, wanted to actually construct their hail right there, right on this big, large sand dune area, which happened to be right square dab on the middle of Hawaiian burials. And that created a huge struggle and really ignited what became the more modern movement to protect our burial sites. Whereby, I mean, this is, it's, and I might make this an extra credit also, where, basically 1,000 sets of remains. I repeat, a thousand had been dug up until it was forcibly stopped. And it was stopped by protests, it was stopped by politics, and eventually the state of Hawaii had to purchase the land. Hotel had to move up Mauka. But 1,000 remains were dug up before it was eventually stopped. But important to understand, you have these areas, especially any kind of sand area. You have thousands of our people who are buried there in these sands. And of course, questions? Yeah. But I just want to end here with this little image here. This is from the south part of Maui near Kionio-Iyo, looking at Mauka. And as you can see here in the lava fields, but above you can see the oldest and most recent lava flow on Maui. Now it's a little controversial depending on who you read and who you believe, but there are definitely examples of those who wrote about the fact that from the time of between Captain Cook's visit and Captain Vancouver's visit, yeah, so Cook is 1778, I think Vancouver is 1792, shucks, something like that. In between there, it was said that a lava flow did occur, the last lava flow in Maui. Again, remember the Halekla is not dead. Halekla is a dormant volcano. It still has volcanic action below. And this lava flow destroyed the village of that area of Kionio-Iyo. But anyway, the point is also you can see at these hills of Pu. Yes, all these Pu, all these little small hills you see going all the way to the top of Halak, all have their own stories. Also, okay, so that's the end of Akua Mana. Make sure to do all the readings on the folder, that's the last part of Hawaiian cosmogonies. Again, they're very, very short readings. And I wanted to do the last lecture, which is the last reading on that section. Yeah, coming up soon. Okay, aloha.